But in the meantime, though, political parties have until next Tuesday to form councils in 66 hung municipalities. So several opposition parties have made it quite clear that they do not want to work with the ANC. So for more on this, we're joined now by political analyst Sanusha Naidu. Sanusha, good to have you as always, and thank you so much for your time this morning. I mean, I'm sure you could agree with me that the talk is ticking quite fast right now. 23rd November being the deadline for those coalition talks between political parties. But to give us, our viewers, some sort of an idea of where they might be or where they stand at the stage, let's perhaps go, per political party, starting with, let's say, the ANC here, in terms of where you think they are, or at least reports suggest they are, in terms of their negotiations at this point.
Good morning, Tumelo and the viewers. I think it's very interesting to look at the ANC because just from standing back and looking at how other political parties have reacted to them, and the last one being the EFF with their press briefing yesterday, it seems that the ANC is a liability for the big political parties. So you're looking at the DA, you're looking at EFF, you're looking at Action SA, you're looking at parties like the Good Party. But then, of course, you have Patriotic Alliance, which came out yesterday and said they're going into an agreement or a broad agreement with the ANC, which gives the ANC a little bit of traction, but not too much of traction with regard to how they may form coalitions or form a governing council or the kind of support that they need to initiate a council that they could be a majority party in. And I think right now everything is so fragile and in a tipping point, because what's happening is that these talks are essentially breaking down at various pivotal points. So you see this morning, the leader of Action SA saying to the DA, you're not a big party, so don't think that you're going to come here and ask for the mayor position or the mayoral position for Tshwane or Johannesburg. You didn't get a majority in this election. So everything has become rather fragile. It's become almost going around in circles. And the ANC, I think, finds itself not like other political parties don't find themselves, but I think because it's the ruling party, it finds itself in a much more difficult position. I think the DA as well, in listening to the press briefing yesterday by the leader of the DA, it was interesting to also hear the challenges that they're facing in the metros. Now, we kind of have I think there's one coalition that has already been established in the Cedarburg region and municipality. But again, there's a question as well as how much do you go forward if those issues are then affected by, for example, what the ANC councillors did there and boycotted or undermined the first meeting of the council. So it's quite interesting for me that we have less than a week, we have less than 24 hours for them to come to some kind of negotiation strategy, but less than a week for these councils to start forming.
Absolutely. And still sticking with the top three majority political parties here, just in terms of results from these local government elections, the EFF, let's reflect that, because you touched on their press briefing. They made it very clear that they've terminated any conversations with the ANC. It seems, according to them, the ANC didn't bring much to the table then as far as the EFF is concerned, and obviously the conditions. So where does that then leave the EFF?
Well, I think from what the tone was yesterday at the press briefing, it was clear that they're not going to push themselves into a coalition, or they're not going to just go into a coalition for the sake of going into a coalition. They're quite happy to stay on the outside of coalitions or to be on the opposition benches in these councils and play their role like they do. Someone yesterday said to me very interestingly, are we going to see the replication of parliament in these councils, in these hung municipalities, where it becomes the kind of positioning of the EFF in making sure that they play that role that they play in Parliament, they bring it now to these councils where they're not in a coalition. And I think they're very positioned on that. They're keeping to the script of what they are indicating. But I also found it interesting that as much as there was a very kind of facetious approach and response to the Action SA coalition and what that has produced in terms of the Action SA statement over the weekend saying that they're not going to engage with the EFF because the EFF is kind of aligning with the ANC, and now we see that has now been put on cold storage because it's no longer there. They retracted that. The EFF has retracted that statement to say that they're not aligning with the ANC. They're not entering. It's no longer there. They now seem to be opening up a particular door to say we're still on at the negotiating table. The Action SA needs to come back. What I find very interesting is that there's musical chairs here. There's no sense of any kind of certainty of where you're going. It seems to me that when you think about coalitions and you think about the fact that the coalitions were starting not in 2021, they were beginning as early as 2016, then these political parties, and we're not giving, in my opinion, that is, they weren't giving it enough sustenance, enough thought to say what will be the kind of positioning that we have. And I think it's now very important for political parties to include this in their election manifestos, in their election campaigning, to say, this is my strategy, not my principles, but my strategy.
Interesting point there. Sanusha Naidu, I have to leave it then. Thank you so much for joining me this morning, talking around coalition talks, where they stand at this point, given that the time is the clock is ticking, rather, in making sure that they reach an agreement there. All right.